And we're live. Welcome to the newest episode of Ask Me About My Draculas. If you are unfamiliar with the show, we explain supernatural TV, books, and other types of media that involve supernatural stuff, particularly Draculas. At least one person on the show has to not see what we're talking about so they can ask questions and try to figure out what's going on. I am one of your hosts, Kel McDonald, and I make comics that you can read at kelmcdonald.com. Also, I have a spiffy Kickstarter going on right now that you should all go back, called Cautionary Fables and Fairy Tales Asia.
And I'm co-host Ma'at Crook. I'm a graphic designer, do lots of stuff. And my Twitter is Ma'at Crook. Just at Ma'at Crook. There we have it.
And our guest today?
I'm Kelly Fitzpatrick, a comic book colorist. You can find updates on the stuff I'm working on at kellyfscribbles.tumblr.com. I'm kind of all over the place with books that I'm working on.
And today we're going to talk about the Peter Grant series, and particularly the first book, Rivers of London. I'm the only one that has read it, so we'll start with Ma'at. What do you think the Rivers of London is about?
Okay. Because of the nature of our podcast, I thought about all the supernatural characters that might be in a book called Rivers of London. And I think that there is maybe, I picture, like, not just the real river in London, but also, like, maybe some underground rivers. Like, it's a fantasy novel, and there's lots of rivers underneath London, and maybe there's some metaphor going on between that and rivers of blood. So I think there's vampires in it.
Okay. Kelly, what do you think Rivers of London is about?
Well, since it's based in London, my mind immediately goes to Jack the Ripper. So I'm kind of hoping that it's like some sort of weird supernatural Jack the Ripper story. Maybe he's a vampire? I don't know.
So The Rivers of London is the first book in the Peter Grant series. Peter Grant is a biracial detective who is really, really bad at his job and is about to get basically assigned to do paperwork the rest of his career until he sees a ghost, and it turns out he's in touch with magic. And because magic is so rare, he immediately gets like promoted to second in charge of the wizard division because there's only one other guy in the wizard division. So so he has a bunch of like coworker regular cops that are a little bit annoyed that he basically got a pretty sweet gig because he is like one of two people that know how to use magic on the force.
Oh, he knows how to use magic?
Well, he's gonna learn. So.
Okay. And is his coworker a wizard, or is he a wizard hunter?
Okay, so there is one other wizard in the show who goes by the Nightingale, which I guess is a title. It's a little bit unclear if that's like his name or if it's just a title of like Grandmaster Wizardry or whatever. It turns out that his mentor is like super old, but something happened around World War II that made him start to age backwards. So he looks about, I think, 30, but he was like 70 during World War II and has been aging backwards since.
So it's like a Benjamin Button effect.
Yeah, something happened that made him start aging backwards.
So he's going to die a baby.
I guess so.
Okay.
In theory, if he doesn't get killed first, because they do fight some stuff. He has a regular coworker named Leslie who was like his partner before he got sent to the Wizard Division. And Leslie is a great cop. Then he also has a boss who is a lesbian lady who is tough as nails and is pretty rad. The first thing he has to solve is some guy. The book starts with one guy punching another guy so hard his head pops off.
One Punch Man.
Yeah. So they're trying to figure out what magical entity could possibly want people to punch other people so hard their heads pop off. Meanwhile, that's like the big overarching mystery that is happening in the background and they're slowly trying to figure out. At the same time, the reason why it's called Rivers of London is all the rivers in London have sort of a magical personification, and he has to create a peace treaty between the inner city Thames, who is personified by Mama Thames, and like the part of the Thames that is outside like the city limits.
Is the killer a vampire Jack the Ripper?
No, he is not. The killer is a ghost that wants to act out the Mr. Punch puppet play. So the whole, like, all the murders that you get are, like, really, really gruesome and ridiculous. But then, like, if you just read the descriptions, it's like, oh, this is slapstick comedy type stuff.
That play a thing? Is that a real thing?
Mr. Punch is like a puppet show type thing. So it's like the puppet punches another puppet and that puppet's head falls off sort of deal. So it's like funny when it's puppets. But because the ghost is using people, it's gross and horrible.
The Mr. Punch doll is really creepy looking.
Yeah, if you don't know what a Mr. Punch doll looks like. So it's supposed to be like Mr. Punch goes around and like basically kills people via punching.
Or hitting them with a bat.
He hits them with like a bat, or he punches them, or there's a part where he throws a baby out the window.
Yeah.
So that happens in the book where he throws a baby out the window.
I think I've seen this in like an old movie before.
Yeah.
Like court jesters have them sometimes.
Yeah.
Although I'm trying to remember what movie and I can't remember.
I think it's referenced in a lot of movies set in
It's a lot
England.
of England like stuff. It pops up.
Well, I do watch a lot of British stuff, so I'm sure I've seen it before. I just don't.
Okay, and so how gross his face is. One of
the Punch and Judy show.
Yeah. So one of his faces, how weird his face is also part of like one of the clues, because apparently everyone that he possesses to act out this play, if they have the role of Mr. Punch, their face like gets deformed to try and turn into this. But since human features can't physically actually make a Mr. Punch doll face, all these people end up like their face falls off when the ghost leaves.
What? So, what is the connection to the ghost used to be a person? So, what's the connection to that person and the Punch and Judy shows?
I guess I just like them. It seems like it might not actually be a person. It's more like a malevolent spirit of chaos and disorder and stuff.
It's more like a demonic spirit. I watch adventures.
So, like, the whole thing is supposed to be, like, they end up eventually figuring out, like, halfway through that it's Mr. Punch. And Mr. Punch fights another guy in an alley, which is when the first punching thing. Then there's supposed to be a doctor that shows up at this scene, and so he eventually tries to kill a doctor. He throws a baby out the window, and the last sort of showdown is he is supposed to be Mr. Punch versus a cop, and he tricks the cop into killing himself. So he's trying to get Peter Grant to play the role of the cop in the final confrontation.
What's Peter Grant's personality like?
I think he might have ADD, which is why he's a bad cop. And he's not a particularly good wizard either, but he like is good enough to get the job done. It seems like they would have preferred someone who's better at their job on all fronts.
Can anyone learn wizard skills in this universe,
I
or?
guess not, because otherwise there'd be more than two people in the wizard department.
Well, I just thought maybe people are like, I don't want to be a freak wizard. So,
Yeah.
Because his like mind goes off on tangents a lot, you get a little bit of a few like fun scenes where he's trying to like he's basically dicking around with magic to figure out how it works. But through most of the series, the only thing he can do is make a ball of light to use as like a flashlight.
And that's his one skill.
Yeah.
How does he use that to
Well, it's very
in the
handy when you
situation?
don't have a flashlight. Um,
Then how does he stop Mr. Punch if that's all the powers he has?
well, because his teacher is much better at shit than him.
His
Also,
the other
because
cop?
he helps the river spirits all make peace or make some sort of treaty. Um, one of them is sort of a love interest and
The
ends
river
up.
spirit is a love interest.
One of the river spirits ends up as sort of a love interest. It's one of those things where they basically start sleeping together, and it's hard to tell if they actually care about each other because she's a river spirit and would go off to do river spirit things.
Wait. Is this guy kind of like Constantine then? Is he kind of like a playboy kind of?
No, he is absolutely not a playboy.
Okay.
It is mentioned that like she was the only person that he hooked up with in a while.
Oh, okay.
Are there similarities between this story and Dresden Files?
A little bit. Like I would say, like if we're comparing it to Dresden Files, there's more diversity and the humor is drier. A neat little detail is because Peter Grant is biracial, and he grew up with his mom who's black, his default is black. So when he's describing characters, if he says a light-skinned woman, he means a light-skinned black woman. But whenever someone's white, he points out if they're white or if they're Asian or.
Okay.
And also what was neat about the river spirits is it seems like their ethnicity reflects who lives near the river. So all the river spirits are different races depending on who, like, quote unquote, gets life from the river.
So is that why it's called the Rivers of London?
Yeah, because he's involved in their like political drama or whatever.
So the river spirits look human.
Yeah.
How many other spirits do they touch on in this, and like how much other supernatural stuff is touched on in the?
So in the first book, it's just the Mr. Punch spirit and then the rivers, and it's then his boss has an assistant that they don't know what she is, but Peter Grant describes her as something out of a Japanese horror movie.
Okay, so there's possibility of weird yokai being involved.
Yeah. Yeah. He says that he looks like the girl from The Ring, the assistant. And so then the book ends with the big final showdown with the Mr. Punch spirit, and he ends up getting help from one of the river spirits because the river spirit like floods the street and ruins Mr. Punch's plan for like a riot or something. He seems to thrive off anarchy. But it turns out that Mr. Punch possessed his co-worker, the girl cop. So after the first book, her face is all screwed up.
Like how?
Because her jaw got deformed because he basically tried to turn her face into a Mr. Punch doll face.
So she got like a really strong jaw?
Yeah, really strong jaw and then a huge nose, but like, again, like those aren't features that a human can have. So her face then started to like fall apart as soon as they got him out of her. So
Like, kind of got deflated.
yeah. So she in the second book has basically her jaw wired shut and can't talk that well. And
like it broke her jaw.
yeah, it broke her jaw to make it into the Mr. Punch.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It sounds really gruesome.
Yeah.
And then the second book is where vampires come in.
Okay.
Because there's a vampire that feeds off of jazz music, basically, or jazz musicians. That's their favorite.
Are they big fans of jazz, or do they really hate jazz?
They're fans of jazz.
Was it an American vampire that?
No, it's an English vampire, and it's you learn a little bit more about Peter's like family because his dad was a jazz musician and a drug addict, which is why his mom kept him kind of away from his dad. And so this vampire also like used to be a fan of his dad, and then is now maybe trying to finish where they left off. And it also seems like the vampire is unaware that they're a vampire. So they're like, oh, all these jazz musicians that I date just die, and I have no idea why.
What do they have selective memory?
I guess so. Or they're blocking it out.
Yeah.
What's the second book called?
Moon Over Soho.
No, for Soho. Okay. Is that
and
really neat?
Huh? Yeah.
Is that really neat?
Yeah.
And so how does he stop the vampire?
Well, he tracks her down to like where her sort of lair is, and there's the nice cover for the book Rivers of London. It's described as what would happen if Harry Potter grew up and joined the Fuzz.
Yeah. They're really selling that wizardry.
Yeah.
They're like, well, I don't know, we're British and they're wizards, so Harry Potter.
And in the U.S., the first book isn't called Rivers of London, it's called Midnight Riot.
Of course.
Because Rivers of London is too boring a title.
How many books are there?
There's 5 so far. The Moon Over Soho one, like, I don't remember a lot of it because there were more important, like, big things for the whole series going on, so the vampire part kind of fell to the background while he found out that there's an evil wizard about that's he's up to no good, and it seems like maybe his old mentor like ran into him before, and it seems like this evil wizard is the one who turned people into vampires and had directed them toward like jazz musicians or whatever.
That's right. Like he has the power to change.
Yeah.
Not only change people into vampires, but also to give them a like obsession.
Like he turned them into vampires and like basically just pointed them in the right direction. It might be that's why they can't remember that they're vampires. Because he's magic mojoing their minds. And the discussion about the evil wizard is one of my is a good example of the humor in the book, because basically Peter and his boss, the Nightingale, are talking about it, and his boss says that we have to stop this black magician. And then Peter is like, wait. Black magician. And the Nightingale's like, well, that's what you call evil magicians because they're using black magic. And he's like, we need to call him something else because people would describe me as a black magician. And it's like, well, what should we call him? And because they can't think of anything better, they start to refer to the bad guy as the ethically challenged magician.
Oh.
And then in the second book, you find out that Leslie, his co-worker cop who got her face messed up, is now starting to show signs of magic because she had like a spirit in her and stuff. So now she's getting wizard training too.
So now there's 3.
Yep. And they're weird Japanese horror spirit.
So, are these like all ages books or young?
No, they're definitely adult. What with heads getting popped off and babies thrown out the window
Well,
and
you
people.
would say that.
The covers make it look like it could be YA.
Yeah. I think comparing it to the Dresden Files is a good sort of.
I haven't seen the Dresden Files yet.
It's basically Wizard Detective in Chicago. And then
I've seen a few of the episodes, but I think I like the books better.
The third book is about fairies that live in the underground. And they find a guy who's murdered, and he is like the son of some American diplomat, so the FBI gets involved. So he has to solve this murder that involves fairies without letting the FBI know that he has wizardy powers and that they're investigating fairies.
What trouble are the fairies getting into?
Well, like I said, so there's the American student gets found dead, and the big suspect is someone who keeps getting away from the police, and it's because they're a fairy. And they're trying to figure out why the fairies would kill this guy, and also what was he doing to get involved in like fairy shenanigans?
Okay, are they like Tinkerbell fairies or like Edward before he got turned into a sparkly vampire fairies? Are they?
They're like old school fairies, so like they're not particularly nice fairies.
And are they average height?
It depends. Like they seem to vary from character to character. Like the main person who's sort of their guide into fairy world is this kid who's like part fairy and is a con man, but like a really low rent con man. So like he just makes his money off that like find the lady sort of scam.
Can anybody see them, or they can just like?
Yeah, they look like normal people most of the time.
Okay, but they can like do they have the power where like they can choose who sees them, kind of thing, so they can disappear, or?
That again seems to vary from fairy to fairy. So like the guy who's their main informant, who's kind of like a shitbag because he's only part fairy, it seems like his thing is that he eats a lot and that he gets away with scamming people, and that's about it.
So they all have like different powers then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they find like this whole big like underground fairy city society thing. And try to hide it from the FBI.
Are they successful?
No, they end up just spilling all the beans to her and are like, and put in your report whatever you feel like putting in a report because we don't know what the FBI like will believe or not. So they leave it to her to make up the lies to find out the rest of the FBI don't know. And then the fourth book is the one where we get the most of like the ethically challenged magician. Because there is a building unit that is having a lot of weird disturbances around it, and the whole building unit turns out to be like a trap for all of them by the ethically challenged magician. Because there's like a murder and a weird disturbance going on. The only witness to the murder is a nymph, but it's hard to get info out of her because apparently the way the nymphs in their world work is depending on the time of year, depends on what age they act. So since it's springtime, the nymph is acting basically like a 6-year-old, and they find her like playing tag with one of the baby river spirits. So it's hard to get info out of her. So there's a part where like the river spirit who's helping him is like, this would have been better if this murder had like occurred in the summer when they're like more fully grown and acting like an adult.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you pick up, like, if I were to pick up book 2 or 3, would I be able to read it as is, or do you definitely need to read them sequentially?
I think you can read at least the second book as is. Like, I feel like the fourth book is when you need to know the other books beforehand. Because the second book, you just need to know that the girl cop, Leslie's face got screwed up. And then the third book, you kind of just need to know that and that they're looking for the ethically challenged magician.
Would you suggest people reading these books?
Yeah, I really like them. I read them and was like, this is what I wish the Dresden Files was.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
You suggest that over Dresden Files?
Yeah. Cause like I said, there's more diversity and the humor's drier, which is more the type of humor I like, and the female characters are treated better, I think. Because Leslie's a pretty well-rounded character. The river spirit, who is his sort of love interest, is pretty cool. Because she sort of just she's mostly doing her own thing, shows up, and she has a river spirit life to do outside of whatever Peter's up to.
Her life isn't dependent on him.
Yeah.
So what are the differences between wizards in this book and wizards that, all the things we know about wizards now?
So it turns out that it is apparently super duper hard and takes a long time to learn magic. So like I said, his boss was like 70 and then started to age backwards because something went wrong. So his boss is one of the more powerful wizards because he's gotten all these extra years from aging backwards. They do the thing where magic interferes with electronics and stuff, but it's not as bad as like in the Dresden Files where Harry can't go near a computer. Mm-hmm. He just turns off his cell phone before he casts any spells or whatever. There's a lot of Peter doing like tests, like once he figures out that the magic is fucking up his cell phone, he starts to do like a bunch of burner phones and puts them all like varying distances away from himself and then does a small spell and sees which phones have been screwed up. And then he has like some on and some off to see like, so he finds out that the cell phone has to be on for the magic to screw up with it. So he keeps his cell phone off a lot for that reason.
Does that play into the story a lot where he's getting a lot of missed phone calls?
Yeah, sometimes. It's also to show that like his brain goes off on tangents. So he actually gets yelled at by his mentor, who's like, "You're too inexperienced to do all this experimenting and stuff. You need to learn like the basics first, and you need to focus." And apparently him going off on tangents and not sticking with stuff is why he's a quote-unquote bad at his job being a cop. So it's also neat because like that's a flaw for his job, but not a flaw for his character. So it helps him not be the worst wizard in the world or like shitty at everything.
So I know you were mentioning that they're hiding the fairies from the FBI, but how much outside of like their police force and everything are people aware of supernatural things happening?
It seems like people aren't that aware, and like his regular police boss didn't know that there was a wizard department until the guy contacted him saying, "Hey, we need this guy in our department for wizard stuff."
So
and
you kind of get shoved into the basement?
Yeah. So, except the basement is a very nice house, and that's like people just forgot was part of the police force.
So there's been a wizard department
since World War II.
Okay.
What happened in World War II that caused them to have a wizard department?
We don't know yet because the mentor guy is pretty cagey about stuff.
Okay, so it's like PTSD asking him.
Yeah. And the aging backwards mentor doesn't know what he doesn't get out much, so there's a lot of Peter explaining the way like modern shit works to him. Because he is not as curious as Peter is when it comes to like fiddling with random stuff. And then there's a joke where he has to explain what Hogwarts is to his mentor because he made a Hogwarts joke. No, he made a Quidditch joke. And then he needs to explain it to his like over 100 years old mentor.
Oh, it's like that weird scene in True Blood where they're watching Buffy. Where like things exist in their universe that exist in ours, but it's still like pop culture.
Yeah. All the pop culture. He also makes a Last Airbender reference at one point because he's fighting a fairy that like controls Earth or whatever, so he calls him an Earthbender. Nerd shit.
I like that though when like they don't pretend like the other stuff, you know, like like it doesn't exist. Like even in like Interview with the Vampire, I know they mention like Dracula and stuff like that. I like when all that other stuff gets referenced. It makes it more real.
I think it depends on the book. Because sometimes it gets really irritating, and sometimes it also dates the book horribly.
I can see that.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's the level of you can go too far one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Are there only 4 books right now?
There's 5. The 5th one is a little girl is kidnapped and is in rural England, and that's called Foxglove Summer. And so Peter's looking into it because there's supernatural hints of what's going on. And so they think, because what happened is the girl got kidnapped, and then when they found her again, she was acting all weird. And so they thought that she was replaced by a changeling. So that's what, like, Peter was investigating. If the kid that went missing and came back is a changeling.
Are they?
It turns out that the girl was kidnapped before as a baby and replaced with a changeling. And what happened is at age 12, the fairy mom wanted her real kid back and returned the human baby. But because the human kid grew up in fairy world where they got everything they wanted, they're horribly spoiled and a brat.
Oh, no.
I just imagine the fairy mom being like, nah, I'm over this. This was a bad
So
idea.
then what happens is the mom of the human mom, like, drags the spoiled brat human kid into the woods and demands her quote-unquote real daughter back.
Knowing that, did the real mom know that she had been raising a changeling by that point?
I think she figured it out, and that's why she ran into the woods and asked for her kid back. Because that was the kid that she raised, so she saw that as her kid.
Wow.
So what, do they get in a big fight?
Yeah, they have to fight some fairies. And they get help from the river goddess, the river spirit that he's sleeping with again. He goes to her a lot for help because her mentor's like, you're making stupid choices and I'm not going to help you with your stupid choices. But his river spirit booty call is down.
Okay. Is this like the whole like finale, or are there going to be more books?
There's going to be more books because they still haven't found the ethically challenged magician.
So is that still playing out in the background?
Yeah, that's playing out in the background of every single book. The fourth book was the one where it was in the foreground.
Okay.
So yeah, Foxglove Summer is the newest one. The next one comes out next year and is called The Hanging Tree.
Are these on Audible?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
That's how I get all my books, Audible.
Yeah, that's become my lifestyle now.
I know. I was just talking about that today. Like, the only time I ever have time to actually read a book is when I'm like laying in bed with the lights out, which that just isn't going to work.
Yeah, like I have a problem keeping up with the comics that I read, and then thinking about adding novels to it seems really daunting, and listening to an audiobook is just like listening to a podcast, so it makes it a lot more convenient because I have to constantly listen to stuff while I work. So, except when I'm reading scripts. That would be really difficult.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like I just started an Audible subscription like 2 months ago maybe. So it's new for me.
I would highly recommend these. They're good.
Cool. I'll add them to my list. I have a huge list.
And the voice actor does a good job of narrating?
Does a good job narrating it. Also, in the last book with the changelings, they think it makes Peter assume that the Japanese horror movie monster girl that is the assistant to his mentor, he thinks that she might have been a kid that was kidnapped and raised by monsters in Asia or something, and that's why she looks like a Japanese horror monster, horror ghost or whatever.
Like raised by Oni or something?
Yeah, but like no one will tell him, so he's just making guesses.
Does she like ever talk?
No.
Or does she just go,
She does not make any noise.
With her hair over her face.
She doesn't make any noise. She has something covering her mouth most of the time because she has like crazy creepy shark teeth.
Oh.
Oh, there is a yokai that's like that. I'm trying to remember.
So, because the little girl who was raised by the fairy queen is not only spoiled, but apparently has like a minor ability to compel people. So they're not only spoiled, but they're somehow doing a mind whammy to get what they want. Like, So whenever she says, "Give me a Coke," like someone has to give her a Coke.
Which is reinforced her being spoiled.
Yeah. His mentor is like, well, that's like what happens when a kid spends too much time in like fairyland or whatever. So that's what makes Peter start to jump to conclusions that maybe the assistant character of his boss was kidnapped by yokai or oni or something and raised by them for a long time. But yeah, it's a fun series. Has a lot of neat things. And I like that every river in London gets a person to represent it.
This is one of those rare occasions where I actually might
Check
be
out the
convinced
thing
to check it out. Yeah.
Because usually we talk about trash.
Yeah, or even something that I enjoy as I'm researching it. I go, oh, this isn't as good as I thought it was.
Well, when you guys were talking about Castlevania, Symphony of the Night, I'm like, I can see it from where I'm sitting. I have it, and I was like, oh, I haven't played that game in like 10, 15 years or whatever. And I'm thinking like, oh, I really want to play that. Like,
Which Castlevania is that?
it's the PlayStation 1 one.
I only know the Castlevania with the werewolf.
I know! You played the garbage one. Oh, man.
It was the newest one when I grabbed it, so.
Yeah. You should also, this is such a tangent, but the Legacy of Kain games are really fun too. So.
Is that the one with the blue demony looking guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But those are also kind of old.
I remember seeing ads for that.
Yeah, it flew under the radar. I also have the Vampire Hunter D game for PlayStation.
So, yeah. So that's the Peter Grant series. There's not that many Draculas in it. There's only a few.
But it's still supernatural. Everything that you said was
everything's supernatural. It seems more fairy-based than Dracula-based.
Which is also similar to Dresden Files.
Yeah. No, there's way more vampires and Draculas in Dresden Files.
Yeah, it's like an equal amount of fairies and vampires.
Yeah.
I think I need to watch Dresden Files.
I wasn't big on the series. I liked the books a lot better. And the books are read by the guy who plays Spike
James
on Buffy.
Marsters.
Oh, yay!
Yeah.
I like him.
Yeah. And then there's you can find bloopers of him reading the Dresden Files online if you dig around.
I haven't looked for those.
Basically, one of the bloopers is the first time he goes to talk to the White Council, and the Merlin does that big long opening speech in Latin. James Marsters reads like half of it, and then takes a deep breath and goes, "Jesus fucking Christ," and then continues to read the rest of it. And then one of the other ones is he accidentally like skipped a page.
Oh no!
And then he goes like, "Wait, what the fuck is going on?" And then he like, you hear him like, and he goes, "Oh, okay." And then there's a part where when Mab is first introduced and is disguised as a human lady, he reads the whole scene, and then he gets to the part where it mentions that she has a European accent, and then he goes, "Huh." And he thinks you actually get to hear his like thought process on how he picked an accent for her. And he says, "Okay, so that means that she's probably Eastern European, right? Because he'd recognize if someone was from France, because most Americans have at least heard like a stereotype of it." He goes, but people don't know if you're from like Latvia or Austria or he goes, so then he just picks one and then he does that accent. He rereads the scene using that accent.
That's kind of awesome.
Yeah, so you can find like the bloopers. It's all from the fourth book, all the bloopers. But
How many? I know we're on a tangent with Dresden Files here, but how many Dresden
We get
Files
on
books
that.
are there?
Dresden Files, they're on 15.
Oh, that's a
Yeah.
time investment.
Yes, that's a lot of Dresden Files.
And they're all read by him?
Yes.
Okay.
There was one that was not.
No, they re-recorded that one, so now they're all read by him.
Yeah.
There was one book that wasn't read by James Marsters, and I guess enough people complained that they went back and like re-recorded it with him reading.
Yeah, it was really really pulled me out of the moment. It took I don't know if I ever really stopped noticing that it was
The thing that bothered me about that
by the right person.
is the guy who was the reader for that one book didn't seem to understand when Harry's narration was sarcastic.
Yeah.
So, because in particularly there's a part where he says, and I made a noise that didn't sound at all girly and was very manly indeed.
Mm-hmm.
And he read that in like a deep manly voice, and it was like, no, that's the opposite of what he means. That was sarcasm.
You sold me on the Rivers of London.
Yeah.
Talking about Dresden Files actually reminds me of how much I did enjoy about it, but also like I did notice the diversity the lack of diversity was a
There's
issue
Sonya, and that's about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a shot.
Are both of those series both written by white men?
Yes,
That's a
both
good
of them
question.
are written by white men.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And one of them seems more aware of adding diversity than the other. I know that the writer for Rivers of London actually got in sort of a big argument with the American publisher because they kept putting someone on the cover who wasn't black.
Oh, that's the same thing that happens to Ursula K. Le Guin.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up the cover for the American edition because it's called Midnight Riot in the U.S. So this is the cover like he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the cover.
They're like, just put him in silhouette.
Yeah.
What the hell?
So, and the same thing for Moon Over Soho,
Weird.
which is the second book. And then they started to just use the covers from the other. They started to use the UK cover after that.
I think the UK covers look nicer anyway, but they also are, just from like a design standpoint, but they're also do give that more of like a young adult novel feel.
Yeah. Definitely think that the UK covers are prettier.
They are prettier. Even the American covers don't really seem to give a clue as to what the book's about.
Yeah.
The American covers just look kind of like they're trashy action novels.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was my thought too.
Needs more fire.
It just got made into comics.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Who did it? Like which publisher?
I'm trying to find out because I remember not being crazy about the art and then like not paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
So it is I don't
Oh,
know.
Titan.
Yeah.
Okay, so that makes sense because he's English, so they're going with
Yeah.
yeah, an English publisher. Who does it say the who else worked on it?
Let's find out. Warriors of London at Titan Comics. So the comics are written by the writer, it looks like.
Oh, who's written some Doctor Who stuff?
Yeah.
Which also would make sense why he's at Titan, because they published the Doctor Who stuff.
Oh.
The artist is Lee Sullivan, and the colorist is Luis Guerrero.
Okay.
So yeah. We've gone for about an hour. We can.
Yeah, we have.
Thanks everyone for watching, and sorry we didn't have any Draculas last month. We had guests cancel on us.
No, it was the infestation of were rats or something.
Oh yeah, it's the Draculas got us.
Yeah.
Dracula turkeys got us. But yeah, so we'll be back 2 weeks from now.
Yep.
Thanks everyone for sticking with us.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.